Welcome everyone to another episode. I am so excited this morning. We have a really special guest today. Today we have Terry Mathis, who is the CEO of ProAct Safety. And Terry, thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing this morning?
Great, good to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to pick your brain. I know you have 28 years in just the safety industry as a safety professional. And so I would love to just start with, how did you get into safety and how have you seen safety changed over your career?
Oh, it's changed tremendously, obviously. I mean, the whole world has changed over my career. I was in my corporate career at Coca-Cola. I went through several different positions, but wound up being the director of training. And more of the training came to be safety training. And I was also kind of a corporate problem solver. So every time they had a big project, not every time, but many times when they had a big project, they'd put me in the lead of that project team. So Coca-Cola had spent a massive amount of money on the physical part of safety. I mean, improving the safety of our locations, the provision of PPE, and all those physical things like that. And it paid off tremendously. Our lagging indicators improved tremendously. Well, they continued to pour that money into it, and it quit paying off. It leveled off, and they got to the level where it wasn't a conditional part of safety. So they put me in charge of this project. And we, after spending a potload of their money and hiring some of the most brilliant people in the country, we came to the conclusion that it was behavioral. That if we were going to make further gains in safety, it wasn't going to be with conditions, it was going to be with people. Mm-hmm. So we started focusing on people like that. And not too long after I did the first projects there, another behavior-based safety company came along and lured me away from Coca-Cola. And I lasted about almost 2 years there before I had just total disagreement with the way they were going about things. And I broke away and started ProAct Safety. That's 28 years ago now.
Oh.
So I've been in safety longer than 28 years, but I've been strictly in safety for the past 28 years.
Got it.
Tremendously. In my early days at Coca-Cola, OSHA came into being, and there were no trained safety professionals. So we went around to various people in the company and said, "You'd be a good safety professional. Would you like to be one?" And they said, "What's a safety professional?" And I have no training for this. And we said, "Well, we'll get you some. We'll let you join, some of the organizations, take some of the magazines, go to some of the conventions, and, bring you up to speed and everything." And that was safety kind of grew out of nothing, really. We were serious about safety, but not because the government made us be. And then when OSHA came into being, everyone was scared, of what the regulations would be, what the penalties would be for not being safe. And so they all redoubled their efforts, to get in compliance. But then as you and a number of other people have said after that, where we're going now is way beyond compliance. OSHA rules and regulations are very minimal standards. If you're not doing that, that's like trying to be in the major leagues when you can't pitch and catch. It's very basic. So everybody's trying to go, I think, above and beyond that.
Yeah.
But you can't ignore that either. And I think some of the, I won't name names, but some of the behavior-based safety gurus, self-proclaimed gurus, said, well, behavior-based safety is the magic bullet, the magic potion and everything. If you'll do this, you don't have to do anything else. And it was disastrous. A lot of people quit doing the very basics in safety, thinking that was going to be the overall solution to everything. And it's like trying to build a skyscraper and saying the foundation is not important. It's that's kind of where safety has gone over these years. And just recently, too, there's been a big movement away from the behavioral approaches, sort of, into what they're calling human and organizational, et cetera. So what they're looking at is not just what people do, but why they do it.
Yeah.
And what it is within the organization that actually reinforces those kind of behaviors. And that was kind of astounding to me, because the way I've always done behavioral approaches took that into consideration from the very beginning. We didn't think people do things for no reason. And we didn't naively think that one session of feedback is going to change a 20-year habit, and all these kind of things. So, we were looking at those things from the very beginning. It was really kind of shocking to me to hear the HOP folks, come along and say, well, you've got to pay attention to the organizational influences. And gee, you weren't.
How did you operate any other way? That's interesting. And I love your perspective with yes, behavioral-based safety, when that became a fad, when that became a big topic, that a lot of people raced to that and only embraced that and forgot about the fundamentals. So that's an interesting perspective that I haven't heard. And I agree with you that sure, the behavior side is important. The human piece is important, but we can't ever lose sight of just the fundamentals, the foundation, as you referred it to. And so what were some of the greatest learning lessons at Coca-Cola that you took away from that maybe shaped your philosophy of safety when you started ProAct Safety?
Well, one of them was a very basic thing, just leadership. Leaders set the priorities in organizations. And if safety is not a priority, it can't be the top priority. That kind of nonsense has gotten me in all kinds of problems. So a major oil company called me in one time and said, Terry, we're going to say that safety is our number one priority. What do you think? And I'm sitting there saying, God, I don't even want to tell you what I think, So I said, okay, you guys are the board of directors. Look me in the face and tell me you want to go tell your stockholders that this company is the safest company that ever went broke. Anyway.
They said that's a great, I think so many safety professionals can relate to what you're speaking on is, okay, my leadership team that, I'm the safety director at a company here at XYZ, and the leadership is telling me that safety is everything. Is that how I should lead? So I think a lot of people can relate to your experience there. So what do you tell? I guess I don't want to, I want you to answer that first question. Sorry that I interrupted, but the greatest learning lessons from Coca-Cola that shaped your philosophy in how you looked at safety.
Well, again, my first one, I don't know if it's my greatest one, but my first one was if the leaders don't lead it, if they don't talk the talk and walk the walk, then it just disintegrates as it goes down through the chain of command, through the chart, it just gets weaker and weaker as it goes down. Mm-hmm. And, the president of I guess I shouldn't name names, the president of a major metals company one time had a meeting of all his people around the world. This company's huge. They have 500 and something sites around the world. And he had a live meeting with the leaders of every site. So that means that some people on the other side of the world are staying up at midnight to listen to his address and everything. And he got through and he said, how did I do? And I said, you did great, except we agreed that we were going to really promote this new program that we're doing out here, and you didn't mention it. And he said, oh, come on, Terry. The fact that I didn't mention that doesn't diminish it in importance. And I said, you just woke people up around the world. You just spent $1.5 million. What you said is important. What you didn't say is not important. Anybody out there that doesn't take your message that way, fire them. Mm-hmm. They're not paying attention. I said, you just set the priorities for the company and you left that one out.
Wow.
So it is no longer a priority for the company, and you're going to have to do a lot of work to make it a priority for the company. When all it would have taken was a mention in that talk, and it would have already been there.
Yeah, I agree with you that you can. I know you talk and network with so many other safety professionals, and I'm sure a common thing that you hear is an in-house safety director working for a large, small, medium-sized company, and they're telling you that the leadership simply doesn't buy into safety 100%. And I've always believed that you, as a safety professional or safety team even, you can only take it as far as that leader will let you. You can't take it further than what they will allow and what that leader believes in. So I agree with you. And what was your unique, it sounds like you have a lot of unique perspectives and that you go against the grain and challenge what was, maybe industry norms. So when you started 28 years ago, ProAct Safety, what was your philosophy on how a safety culture was created? And maybe even not even a safety culture, just a company culture. Because I hear what you're saying. It's not separate. Safety culture, company culture. We're humans, is what you're saying. So, what did you believe in 28 years ago?
Well, theoretically, you just said there's no such thing as a safety culture. Cultures don't form around themes; they form around groups of people. Yeah. So whatever this group of people's culture is, whatever the safety part of that is, is the safety culture. I mean, we pull that nomenclature out just to kind of be clear about what we were talking about, knowing that it wasn't totally accurate, in what we were doing. But I wrote my first book on safety culture in 1996. If that tells you how early, I formed ProAct Safety in 1993.
Yeah.
I wrote a book 3 years later on safety culture. And people are going, safety culture, what's that? What do we do? How about behavior-based? Let's go do that. I never intended to be a behavior-based safety company, but it was in such demand when I first started. I mean, I didn't have time to do anything else for the first number of years. When can you come do this and this? And I mean, we were just pulled in every direction. And we didn't even advertise or do any outreach or anything else. People came to us and said, "Hey, we understand you do this too. Compared to the other people who do it, and when can you come? When you come help us get started?" So it took us a long time. And I had a brilliant performance management guy who helped me start the company, Dr. Dean Spitzer. And Dean because we got so tied up in that one thing, Dean let himself get lured away by this crazy little company called IBM, who basically paid an outrageous salary and said, "We'll give you an outrageous budget and just come decide how to make IBM a better company." And I said, "You don't need a helper with that, do you, Dean? I mean, if he had pulled me along, I might have gone on to that too. That's an awfully good gig."
Wow. But he was so what did he do with you? How did you, what was your partnership like? And what was his mission? What did you collaborate on?
Yeah, well, Dean he was Mr. Performance Management. And I met him through one of his books. He wrote a book called Super Motivation. It was on the business bestseller list for like 8 years. It was outrageously good. Anyway, I didn't read the book. I read a synopsis of it. I was buying these, condensed books and things like that. And I read that. He said, "I have a list of common demotivators. I have a list of common motivators. I have a list of guidelines for rewards and incentives." I mean, I would have read the book just for the 3 lists, Wow. I said, "Yeah, I'd like to check that against my own little mental model of that." But anyway, I wound up calling him on the phone. We became great friends. And, he was falling out of what he was doing at the time. And I had just left the company I was with and was ready, starting the company. And we got together and collaborated on all of that. And Dean actually co-authored that book on safety culture with me in 1993. Okay. No, he's a brilliant guy. I mean, anything in management, performance management, you talk to Dean, he could not only recite the book, he knew the author personally and, could tell you everything about it. And that was just a walking encyclopedia of that kind of knowledge, just fabulously valuable, informing and developing our own training materials and everything in the company in the early stages like that. And a lot of his stuff is still built into our training materials here and there. But no, he was a fantastic help and still a great guy. I think he's retired now and doing pro bono work for a bunch of folks out there. So if you need a pro bono help with performance management, call Dean Spitzer. He's one of the best.
Well, what's interesting is that this is continuing on the theme of what you started and opened with, was that it's not just, there is no safety culture. It's just there's just culture. It's just common beliefs of what an organization believes in. And what I'm hearing you say with this human performance side of things, how many times did you get called out by a company needing your help, thinking that, hey, this company's thinking, hey, we have a safety problem, Terry, but you came in and it was not a safety problem. How many times did that happen? Or is it all the time? I'm actually challenging my own beliefs here. When people think they have a safety problem, do they have a company, an organizational, a human, a performance issue?
Almost always. I mean, a culture doesn't form for no reason. A culture forms because of the influences on the culture. And inevitably, one of the influences on the culture is leadership, it's supervision, it's, rules and procedures, it's all these other things that make up the job that people do. And one of the ones that has really come up fabulously in my career is this dichotomy between safety and production. And most companies The man who gives you your marching orders is a production man. Then the guy with the safety in his title comes around and tells you otherwise.
Yeah. Yes.
And you put the worker in a dichotomy. Well, do I be safe or do I be productive? It's a terrible thing to do, And I was working with a roofing manufacturing company years ago, and I thought one of the most enlightened corporate safety guys I've ever worked with. And as we went to each site to do a behavioral approach on what we were doing, this was his little speech. He said, we used to think of manufacturing as units out the door. And when we found out that units come back into the door because they were defective, that wasn't productive. He said, so we redefined production as quality units out the door. He said, now I'm going to introduce you to Terry Mathis, and we're going to expand that definition even further because we never made those units to hurt people. So what we're going to say is production now is not just units out the door. It's not just quality units out the door. It's safe quality units out the door. And I loved that because what he did was not compete with production. He redefined it. And he expanded that definition of production to include safety. And I think that's the key that most companies need and most companies miss. They create this dichotomy. They make the workers choose one or the other. And when production competes with safety, production wins every time.
Every single time. I couldn't agree with you more. And that actually leads beautifully into my next question. That when you were talking about that, this made me think of what is the problem with the way most companies track metrics, safety metrics? Do you often see that people are rewarding the wrong things? Are people rewarding the wrong things, or do they just not know how to track safety performance? Or what is wrong with the way we track some of the metrics that we use today?
Well, what most companies use are failure metrics, which is a horrible way to manage anything because most companies are not trying to succeed at safety. They're trying to fail a little bit less, and that's part of that's because failure is all they measure. So you go to a company and say, what's your goal for this year? Well, we're at a 1.2 total recordable rate, and we're going to get down to a point. That's failing less. That's not succeeding. It's a golf score. It's how many strokes can you take off the game out there? So, and the other thing, we're going now from people are saying, well, we can't just manage with lagging indicators. They've realized that. So we want to develop leading indicators. Well, that's going from one-dimensional thinking to two-dimensional thinking. But here's the sad truth. The world's a three-dimensional place. And what they're calling leading indicators generally don't directly impact what they're calling lagging indicators. There's stuff in between. And I think the best model for people to use is what they call a balanced scorecard kind of. So I've come up and I've written, God knows how much about this, what I call a balanced scorecard for safety.
Yeah, what is that? I'm excited.
Well, first of all, the center ought to be your strategy. Okay. And most companies don't have a safety strategy. Quite frankly.
No, you did. No, I couldn't even. The companies that we work with, they're like, what does that even? We don't even have a company strategy. So what do you mean?
That's true. But they're generally, if they're anything, they're programmatic. We got this program and that program and that program, and we're throwing that at our safety problem. And that's our strategy, which isn't a strategy. But at the center is the strategy. Now, over here are the drivers of safety. What are you doing to try to make safety happen? Training, onboarding, supervision, safety meetings, whatever it is like that. Those are the drivers of safety. Now, those don't directly impact your lagging indicators. I'm sorry. What they impact is your culture and your capabilities.
Okay.
So it makes your workers better. It makes their culture better. Now, what does that do? That impacts their performance. Now, if their culture and their capabilities are better, their performance becomes better. And it's their performance that impacts those lagging indicators. So if you look at the old Norton and Kaplan balanced scorecard for management, it says, lagging indicators, drivers, culture competence, performance, and anyway, that's the way to measure safety. How much does your safety training increase people's capabilities? How much does it build the right kind of safety culture? And most people don't have a metric for that. So they think, well, we do more of this and it impacts that. So this, they fall into the old correlation causation trap, saying just because there's a correlation between these two things, one's causing the other, which may or may not be true. Mm-hmm. But generally, that's where we try to steer companies to say, okay, measure the things that you do to drive safety. How many people attended your safety meetings? How many times did your supervisors talk to people about safety? All of these things like that. Now, measure your safety culture. And a performance, a perception survey is one part of a culture measurement. It's not the complete thing. Wow. I've been preaching this for years too. People say, oh yeah, we did the National Safety Council, and it told us this. Well, that's one piece of it, but it's not grounded. A perception, I made the analogy in one of my articles. I said a perception is like asking a bunch of people in a lifeboat out at sea on a stormy day when you can't see the sky and you can't see the shore, and asking them which way is north. Now, you're going to find out something. You're going to find out if they think they know which way is north, and you're going to find out if they agree or disagree with each other. Guess what? You're not going to find out if any of them are right. So I talk about grounding a perception survey. Like one of the things that we tend to ask is, what do you think is your greatest risk? What's the most likely kind of accident that could happen to you working here? Mm-hmm. You know what we find? When you study the accident data, their perceptions and the accident data don't match.
Wow. So oftentimes people think what, maybe their most recent incident, or what are they telling you versus what the data is telling you?
Well, the average worker that we interview can only tell you about 10 accidents. At the most, they can only tell you the details of 10 accidents. So their perception is based on the 10 accidents that made the biggest impression on them, that were closest to them, that happened in their department, that got talked up most in the company, whatever it is like that. You look at the big picture and nobody's 10 matches the big picture.
Wow.
But one of the things you have to do in safety is manage perceptions. You've got to get your people thinking accurately. What is safety? What is my responsibility? What is the most likely thing that can happen to me? What's the precaution I can take to keep it from happening to me? And then asking themselves, do I do it all the time? Do I do it every time? Am I consistent in what I do? So these are all things that to me have become incredibly basic, but I still find organizations not paying attention to.
That is incredible awareness that a new employee, that even an employee that's been there for 10 years can have. What a gift that if that type of data was presented to them in the correct way, what are the risks around me? And if that perception could change, then the culture might change because they're looking at things differently as a group. And so I can see that being a fundamental, but that awareness just isn't there a lot of the time is what I hear you saying. Wow. And so one thing that really, when looking you up, doing my homework, is that you've mentioned that in your career, you've gone from grunt to guardian to guru. And what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I think it's not just true of me, it's true of almost all safety professionals. If they haven't done that, they're on the path to it, hopefully. Yeah. When I first started getting involved in safety, I was a firefighter. I mean, I was totally reactive to those things that demand your attention in safety. Yeah. And I think a lot of safety professionals I go to are still that. I mean, they can't sit down and think strategically. They don't have time. They're too investigating the accidents and chasing down the audits, and trying to correct everything from the last audit and things like that.
So many people are relating to you right now. Yes.
But then if you can get the supervisors doing the day-to-day part of safety, then your safety professional becomes their resource. So now he's a guardian. He's not doing everything. He's making sure everything gets done. Out there in safety, or if a safety department grows and has enough personnel that the leader of the safety department can stick his head above the clouds and think strategically, and look at what they're really trying to do. Then he becomes that guardian. But ultimately, what they want to do is to become the subject matter expert for safety for the organization. You don't want to be doing everything, and you don't want to just be making sure everything gets done. Mm-hmm. You want to strategically look out there and make sure that you've got the right direction and everything, is going that way, and that anybody who has a question can come to you and get their question answered. Yeah. So I think that progression like that is what every safety professional ought to be pursuing. Every organization ought to be pursuing that for their safety professionals, but they're not. National Safety Council has this award. I really love the name of it and the thought of it. They call it CEOs Who Get It. And
I haven't seen that, but that's pretty big. That's pretty powerful.
First of all, I haven't agreed with everybody that gave it to, but the principle is there. There are some organizational leaders who give lip service to safety and fund budgets and everything, but they don't get it. They don't really understand what it takes to make safety operate in their organization, but there are others who do. And that's where you get the really excellent, super excellent, world-class performance in safety. Mm-hmm. It's when a safety leader gets it. The organizational leader gets it and says, no, I know what has to happen to make safety excellent in this organization.
That's wonderful how you lined that out, the journey. That to me, you painted a clear picture of a journey. And I completely agree with you that if you can get there, and I do agree that if you can get there to that guru where you are the subject matter expert, and I think that obviously is the most valuable way that you could pivot yourself for a company versus reactive. And as safety professionals, we're always talking and preaching and teaching about being reactive when it comes to incidents. But I think this would be a great takeaway for the listeners is, are we being reactive with our work within an organization? Are we just focusing on the training ahead of us, the audits, the policy creation, the incident investigations, and not focusing on the strategic piece of it to actually take your program to the next level? And so that's incredible. How you're talking about an award, of CEOs that get it, and that's from National Safety Council. And I hear you saying that safety excellence requires excellent leaders, right? How do you start a conversation with a leader that doesn't get it? Have you had companies that, I'm sure you have come to you with, hey, Terry, we have an issue with our safety culture. We have a culture issue here, but they don't necessarily know at that time that it's them. Yeah. How do you start that conversation with someone?
Well, one of the, Sean Galloway and I kind of came up with this jointly, my business partner in ProAct Safety. But we were with this company that was exactly what you're describing right now. The CEO was basically saying, well, my safety people aren't doing their jobs, and we've got this problem out there. And we asked this leader, we said, is safety, well, first of all, we said, what do you do in safety? He said, well, I delegate that to my safety department. And we said, is safety a core value in your company? He said, well, yes. We said, what other core values do you completely delegate?
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, absolutely.
Now we get in trouble with clients too, right?
But they need to hear it. Yeah.
But it's the truth, and a lot of people have never thought about it that way. And we tell them, your involvement in safety should be strictly strategic. So what you ought to do is not go out there and work in safety. Talk about it. Yes, definitely set the priority in the company, that it's important to you. That's an important message for you to send. But what you ought to do is sit down with your safety leaders and develop the safety strategy. Because if you tell them you develop the safety strategy, I'll develop the company strategy, those two strategies are going to conflict.
They're separate. Mm-hmm.
They're totally disengaged with each other.
Yes.
Safety strategy ought to be not how can we be the safest company in the world? It ought to be how can we do the dangerous job that we do as safely as possible.
Mm-hmm. One conversation. That's one sentence. That's not two sentences.
It's got to be integrated. It's got to be all one thing. The companies that are the most excellent in safety are the ones who have integrated safety into their everyday work. Now, yes, they've made it a priority, but not the priority, not the only priority. I think Paul O'Neill's the only one that took it to that level out there, and his Alcoa experience out there. If you haven't read about that, that was a astounding thing. Well, Paul came in and said they made him the CEO of Alcoa. And he came in and they said, what are your priorities? What are we going to do? How are we going to save the company? He said, we're going to be the safest company in America. And so, but how about the money? How about the stockholders? He said, we're going to be the safest company in America. And by doing that, we're going to become a lot better company than what we're doing. And one guy said, I went out and got on the phone and told everybody to sell their Alcoa stock because some hippie is taking over the company that's going to run it broke and everything. If you look at what happened over that period of time, Alcoa grew exponentially. And Paul O'Neill will tell you that one of the reasons it was is they started listening to their employees. Wow. They started listening to them about safety, but then they found out they had a lot of other ideas that weren't just safety. They were productivity, they were efficiency, they were quality, they were other things. And when they started listening to their employees and improving their company the way they did it like that, the company grew by leaps and bounds. Mm-hmm. If you had bought a share of Alcoa stock, it would have paid for itself 2 times in dividends by the time Paul O'Neill left the company out there, and you would have made about $12 million off your little investment over there. It was incredible what he did, and safety and quality are indicators of each other. You know how many CEOs I've talked to who said that they look at the safety of contractors that they're thinking of hiring, or people they're thinking of partnering with, or companies they're thinking of acquiring.
I would hope the majority of them, but are you about to say no?
No, a lot of them don't. No, a lot of that's secondary thought. I worked with the company last year that had grown by leaps and bounds, and the safety department was just buried because they'd acquired all these new companies, fired the safety professionals in them, and expected their corporate people to take that over and run it. I mean, they were just buried in their job out there. So no, they didn't take that into consideration. Yeah, I was on a due diligence team for a company that was going to buy a copper mine in South Africa a number of years ago. And everybody on the team voted to buy that property except me. And I talked the CEO out of buying it over there. And it was really more of a medical issue than anything else. Mm-hmm. The South African government had just passed a law saying that any foreign entity that buys a company is responsible for the health of all the employees. And I said, do you want to take on 14,000 employees who are 80% HIV positive? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I don't think so. And he looked around the room and he said, the safety guy found this out, kind of chastised other folks out there. But, I did an interview with 10 of the Fortune 50 CEOs several years ago. Oh, and I asked them about their thinking on safety. And I said, well, why do you insist on fantastic safety performance from your contractors? Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, they gave me 2 common answers. The first of all, they said, well, I don't want to mix a bunch of unsafe people with my safe people. I don't want them bringing people in that dilute my safety culture, which was interesting. But then the second one, they got this little aside look on their face like that. And they said, by the way, Terry, if they're bad at safety, they're bad at other things too.
Yeah. So think about that. My goodness. And that
they think that safety is an indicator of how well you run your business. And I think they're right.
And that goes back to the comment that you just made of safety and quality are indicators of each other. Oh, yeah. And that is a huge takeaway. And I think that the journey that you described was beautiful in any safety professional's career path is going from grunt to guardian to guru. That we'll tag that as the name of our podcast today, because that is a beautiful journey that everyone should strive towards. And I cannot believe that we're already over on time, because I feel like we've been talking for 2 minutes. I can listen to you all day and talk to you all day, because I'm extremely passionate about people and the human performance side of organizations and how cultures evolve. And, you're clearly the subject matter expert. And so I would love to do a part 2, because I feel like it's been 5 minutes. So I would love to just pick your brain more. You're obviously an expert. So I can't thank you enough for your time today, Terry. And, just to wrap things up, are there any other messages that you would give safety professionals listening today that are trying to take their culture to the next level?
Well, do it a step at a time. The main mistake I see people making with cultures is they try to change the whole thing at once. And they overload themselves and they bog down and they make no progress whatsoever. Break it down into a series of steps. The last book I wrote on safety culture was called Steps. to safety culture excellence, and STEPS is an acronym for strategic targets for excellent performance in safety. Excellent at one thing, then move on to another and on to another and on to another. And there's a roadmap in the book that I wrote that says, here's the, if you've already done that, fine, skip to the next step and do this and create your safety culture, not create, you already got one, but improve your safety culture a step at a time. I use the old Chinese proverb, even a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and once you teach your culture how to step, it's only a certain number of steps to excellence. So that's the key competency of a safety culture.
Wow, Terry, that was beautifully said. I can't wait to read that book. And if you want to learn more from Terry, we're going to link his contact information if you have any questions, any follow-up questions. And I thank you. I can't thank you enough for your time today. So everyone, thank you for listening. And we'll absolutely be linking your books as well. So thank you guys. Have a great day. Thank you for listening.
Great meeting you.